Chris Mahana Kwanzaamas and all that good stuff. Um, got a lot to get into today. I want to first say I'm wearing, because we've been trying to highlight black-owned apparel and designers. This is melanin apparel. I'm sorry. It says nah. Rosa Parks, I thought, and Ruth thought, because she's been dressing me the last few weeks, this was appropriate given all the crazy going on locally with Casey Goodson, who was shot 3 times in the back. Made national news, but still locally, we've seen more, um, let's say, outrage behind the OSU Michigan game being canceled than we have about a human life being taken. So, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But this is the final episode of Drumversations for this year. We will definitely be back next year. We're going to take a break and rest and figure out how we can make it gooder for you and have more engagement and more content. So if you don't already, follow us on Twitter at Mark Lomax II, or check us out on any of the social media by or be in touch with us, hashtagging Drumversations. What happens? Did you hit sing?
No, they said they can't hear.
I know.
They said the sound is off.
I'm asking so I can troubleshoot. That's all good. No, pull that up. That's it. Hopefully y'all can hear better now. I don't know why that was down. Is the sound better? Can you hear now? Hello? Cool. Okay. So we're having technical issues today because we're starting, I was going to say that, we're starting today or ending today as we began. Our folks, our partners at Mills James have come into contact with the virus, COVID, so we are literally doing what we did back in March when we started. So it is what it is. You do what you got. You use what you use to use what you got to get what you want type of stuff. We're just using our regular old equipment and, doing what we can. So I'm wearing melanin apparel. It says nah, Rosa Parks, because we thought it was appropriate to, one, continue to elevate black businesses and designers, but also with everything going on in Columbus with Casey Goodson murder. African-American man coming home from the dentist with food in his hands, got shot 3 times in the back by Franklin County sheriffs. Not feeling the response of the public, who seem to be more concerned with the cancellation of the OSU Michigan game than they are with this state-sanctioned murder. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. Got a lot to talk about today as it relates to wrapping up, at least for this year, our conversation about moving toward a politics of humanity and what that means to leverage change for transformation. Part of that is connecting, so please put your ancestors in the chat, and I'm going to play the ancestral drum call, and we'll call them at the end. Ashe, we honor the life of Casey Goodson and all that have fallen to police brutality. We have other folks.
Ruby Barr,
Ruby Barr, Ashe.
Edward and Ernestine Cox,
Edward and Ernestine Cox, Ashe.
Ed Bell,
Ed Bell, Ashe.
Edna Bell,
Edna Bell, Ashe.
Charles Bell,
Charles Bell, Ashe.
William Bell,
William Bell, Ashe.
George Bell,
George Bell, Ashe.
Mike Bell,
Mike Bell, Ashe.
Patricia Bell,
Patricia Bell, Ashe.
Bell,
Danielle Bell, Ashe.
Larry Baker Jr.,
Larry Baker Jr., Ashe. Harold Smith, Ashe. All ancestors who called and not named, Ashe, because as we go into 2021, we'll need their help and guidance more than ever. Ashe. So, this year, we started with a discussion of how we create transformation in society. We started talking about how we do it from the inside, how we do it in community, in terms of change and transformation, and how we create that as above, so below, as within, so without kind of application of the changes that lead to transformation. Today, I want to kind of just reiterate that as we go into at least what for me is a season of reflection and intense meditation on what the coming year can be, should be, will be, based on not just my intentions, but where I think I am most valued for my community, for my people, for society. So this hopefully wraps up to a certain point, puts a period on this conversation about politics of humanity. We'll continue to discuss things in that context, but this is still kind of the beginning of that conversation, right? Because it's a relatively new concept, so we have to kind of dig deep into what it is in order for us to then cultivate that politics and do the politics. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Like I said, we started talking about change and transformation, and I think it makes sense for us to create a differentiation between change and transformation, because many people want change. We want to see, do, and be different. We want the country to be more just and equitable. We want people to change, and we want their behaviors to change. We want them to wear masks. We want them to treat people humanely. We want police to stop killing folks. We want folks to care more about each other than they do about their things, right? We want change. Even Barack Obama talked about change, right? His whole 2018 campaign was about change. Be the change we want to see, right? Change is coming because my administration is going to change things, right? And, even though Barack Obama, as an example, did change when he won, like he changed what and who could be president, or at least our perception of what a president was and who could be a president, right? He did not, by becoming president, engage in the work of transformation, right? Things aren't and weren't wholly different in the country, right? So there's a difference between change and transformation, right? A lot of people talk about change. A lot of people want change, but a lot of people don't actually want to change, right? External change is one thing, but the requisite internal change that needs to happen to bring about the external manifestation of change is a different thing entirely, right? So I think one of the fundamental barriers that we face in bringing about change is that when we talk about change, we're really, when we talk about it, we're really talking about transformation, right? And that's where we get hung up and why we don't see the outcomes. It's like folks talking about racism and equity and saying, it's wrong and, race is a public health crisis, but then we don't do anything to address the people who are racist and the system of racism in a substantive way that removes that from the equation, right? Because we can make these pronunciations and platitudes, but in order to actually address racism and race, the construct of race as a root causal factor for these manifestations that people want to address more comfortably as opposed to substantively, then we're talking about the code and not the pneumonia, right? Because people have to change in order for racism to go away. people have to change for our understanding of race as a construct to be removed from how people engage each other and have access to resources, right? That's a shift not in policy first or procedure first, but in people first. Yes, there are those who talk about social experimentation and all this other kind of stuff, social organization. I can't remember the exact term for some reason. That says, we can create policy that guide behaviors that then lead to changes in the culture. Yes, but what we found in America is that we cannot, social engineering, we cannot legislate behavior in a way that shifts culture. If we could, then the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act that happened in the 60s would have done that work for us, right? So what we have found is that we have to actually change within ourselves in order to see a transformation in the external space. So today we're going to talk about the difference between change and transformation. Change is simply this. You can change your clothes, you can change where you live, you can change where you work, you can change what school you go to, what church, mosque, synagogue, wherever you worship, you can change all of that. But that does not mean transformation, right? If I change my clothes, I have a different shirt on now than I did yesterday, but I'm the same person, right? That's not a transformation, that's a change, right? Change can be substantive and change can be significant, but change is not transformation, right? You can't have transformation without change, but you can have change without transformation, right? Transformation happens at the deeper level. Transformation is a completely different type of being and existence than what happened before. We talked about the caterpillar and the butterfly. The caterpillar is no longer a caterpillar. Like, we actually have different names for what happens pre and post transformation when it comes to caterpillar going into the chrysalis and transforming into a butterfly, right? They serve different functions. They engage the world differently. They may even eat different things. I mean, I don't know all about butterflies, but I know they're not caterpillars, right? That is a transformation, right? A caterpillar can change, meaning it can go from the dirt to your house, right? If you as a kid or your kids captured the caterpillar, that's a change in environment and not a transformation. The transformation happens after a process, right, that occurs in the chrysalis, where the whole physical being of the caterpillar breaks down and is remade into something new. That's more than just a change of environment or a change of clothes, right? So changes can be substantive. More often, they are superficial. Transformation means a completely different way of being, seeing, and engaging the world, right? It consists of change, several changes, but transformation is a completely different way of being, right? Where change can, it's just a change of clothes. It's more superficial. So there's a differentiation there that I think we need to be clear about when we're talking about we want change. Well, no, we don't really want change when we're saying that. We really want transformation. But in either case, there is work that has to happen internally and externally in order to create the levels of change that lead to transformation, right? Today, I want to wrap up this year's conversation about the cultivation and practice of a politics of humanity by focusing on the last of the three ritual disciplines we discussed. The first being the ritual of connecting to the universe, the ancestors, the earth, and the cosmos, and each other. The second is the ritual of preparation, which we focused on last week, the grounding of oneself and community and the requisite knowledge and skill sets to accomplish a particular goal, this being the goal being transformation. And lastly, the ritual of action, the actualization of being connected and prepared, evidenced by a set of actions or changes that manifest in transformation, right? Change happens in the first ritual because power begins at the point of conception, right? So as soon as you make the decision to change, change happens. Change leads to transformation, right? The second ritual lays the foundation for the transformative events that happens in the third ritual, the ritual of action, right? We'll discuss the difference between change and transformation and how to go about the process of bringing about transformation after a musical break. All right, we're talking today about the third ritual in the process of cultivating and practicing a politics of humanity. And we're going a little deeper than we did when we talked about it back in August. So this section, I want to really focus on leveraging change for transformation, right? The ritual of action is actually a culmination of actions. I know if you really think critically about what we've been laying out, the ritual of connection, the ritual of preparing, the ritual of action, connecting and preparing are actions, right? They're actions. This is all about cultivating a bias toward action in a way that is humane and imbalanced with each other, the planet, and the cosmos. Action, right? Actions speak louder than words. If we don't do the thing, it won't happen, right? So, as I've said before, religion and spirituality, democracy and freedom, as concepts, aren't just states of consciousness or being for their own sake, right? They are and can only exist when people manifest them through their individual and collective actions, right? Democracy is not something that is just because. It's something that we do, right? You can be religious, but you are religious because you do something religiously, right? Not just because you say, I'm religious, right? I mean, that's the start, but then you have to do something that reinforces that. Engaging in notions of spirit, understanding spirit, how it works, how it moves, how to use the spirit for the benefit of yourself and others. That's something that you do, right? Even learning about it, growing in a religious or spiritual practice, that's an action, right? Democracy is an action. Freedom is something that you do, right? Even when we were physically bound, we could still be free because we did something spiritually, consciously, intellectually that brought about a sense of freedom that our bodies could not enjoy, right? But it was still an activity. It was still those little things that you did to not be completely 100% obedient to massa, right? That exercise what little physical freedom you had because there was a significant level of freedom intellectually or consciously and spiritually, right? The first ritual, the ritual of connection, is an action. They're all actions, right? But the first one is an action, connecting oneself to the ancestors and the cosmos and to the broader community cannot and won't happen until first, again, a person makes a decision to do and then begins to do the things that manifest various levels of connectivity required to bring about a transformation, right? So what does that mean, connecting to self, right? We talked about this over the last couple of weeks. Do you make a habit of spending time with yourself, right? Do you make a habit of developing a relationship with yourself? Not just being alone, but being actively engaged with yourself, right? Do you have a habit or have you cultivated a practice of being brutally honest with yourself, right? About who you are, who you've been, and what you want to be, right? About the why and what with respect to purpose, the why you're here and what you're here to do, what you will do as a result of that. Do you regularly get or set aside 5, 10, 15, 30, an hour or so of time, minutes a day of time to do this work, to think through these things, right? If so, great. You're on the path, or you're probably maybe even further along than I am, of becoming who you are ultimately supposed to be, right? You've already likely connected and opened up new layers and levels of self-knowledge, understanding, and yes, more work. I say more because, the more we get in touch with ourselves, the more time that we take to learn who we are, to understand who we are, and to master who we are and are becoming, right? The more we realize there is more to us than we ever thought that we then have to continue to understand, master, and know, right? So it's not like, I figured me out, yay! Well, that's today, maybe, but what about tomorrow, right? There's always work to do. Everything is about action and doing because there's always work to do. Racism doesn't take a day off, so why should we? Right? Self-care is important, but this is the part of self-care that we are least likely to really engage, and that's ourselves, right? Resting, I mean, I've been really intentional the last couple of weeks about resting, but that's cool. That's a physical thing, right? The deeper thing is that spiritual and levels of consciousness that allow us to tap into the energy, the presence, the guidance, the wisdom that allows us to do and be who we are supposed to be and do and what we're supposed to do on this physical plane, right? So I said master, understand, and know, right? So when we master ourselves, we do that by removing what I'm sorry, let me back up. Understand as much as possible what the causal factors are that make us who we are, right? So that means as you're spending those 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, an hour, however much time you have daily to engage with yourself, you are literally processing. You're doing the work of understanding, hey, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think what I think? Why do I do what I do? Why do I respond to stimuli the way I do? In every context in which you find yourself, these are the questions you must ask yourself, right? And when you understand those causal factors, then you realize that you may or may not have had a conscious role in cultivating that belief system, in cultivating those habits of mind, those habits of being, right? And so now, once you've determined whether or not you've consciously established those beliefs, actions, and principles, you can question them, right? Why do I believe this? Do I believe this? And if I don't, what do I actually believe, right? I tell you what, that's some scary stuff. I remember, and Ruth can tell you, I got fired from church, and like the first Sunday, I didn't go to church because I was upset that I got fired for no reason, and I was like, I'm done with church, and I got fired from 5, so this happened a few times. But I really thought that I was going to hell for not being at church. Because I had been socialized, I mean, it might seem silly now, but I had been socialized that this is what you do if you are a good Christian and you're planning to go to heaven. You have to show up. You have to be a part of that ritual. You have to do, you have to do, you have to do, right? And what I had to come to grips with, and it took time, about a decade really, is whether or not I believed that for myself. Whether or not I had to be at that church in order to get into whatever my concept of heaven. And did my concept of heaven align with what was being taught in that church or even in that religious practice, right? As I began to ask myself these questions and work through these beliefs and determine whether or not I really believed them, I started to change, right? And now there are a lot of people who I consider still family that I just don't agree with because I've done work that they haven't. And I'm not saying it's a value judgment better or worse or any other kind of way. It's just that I've changed. And because I've changed, I can't exist in that same way, in that same vibration, right? And so I love them dearly, but we're on different paths. Yeah.
It's scary to get to know yourself.
It is absolutely scary to get to know yourself because when you get to know yourself, you realize that you have power. And when you realize you have power, you become accountable. And that level of responsibility is frightening because we've never been told that. We've never been taught that, right? So this is really opening up avenues and aspects of yourself that we've been taught never to engage or aren't even aware they exist, right? So we have to first understand the why, what, and how of who we are. And then we do the work of mastering, right? We master ourselves by reimagining or I can't even read my handwriting, by understanding what we don't like and kind of removing what we don't like, that's the word, through the discipline of will, right? What I mean by that is we use the same discipline of will that you would do to get up every morning and go to work or go to school or what have you. That's will, right? You're willing yourself to these things even if you don't like them. But you're using your will to establish new and evolved versions of yourself, iterations of yourself. Do we have another comment?
It's also brave and empowering.
It's absolutely brave. I would not use the word empowering because you can't empower yourself because you already have power. You can't empower other people because you already have power. That, to me, is like a class-based word and a word that deals with the power deficit. We don't have deficits. What we don't have, ultimately, in this context anyway, culturally, is the agency to access the power that already exists. right? And once you begin this work, you begin to connect, which then elevates your agency to leverage the power that you already have, especially when you meet others that are on a similar path. When you have collective people who know their power, you can then get that level of change that leads to transformation, right? So your will, discipline to establish a new and evolved version of yourself at the various iterations, right? Based on principles and values that matter most to you. Not what somebody told you matters because they want to in some way influence your behavior or control you, right? These are decisions that you can make and need to make for yourselves, right? Then, once we've made those decisions, we can exert the level of discipline needed to hold ourselves accountable for living up to the new standards, our new values, living out our new values and principles, right? That's what it means in one sense to be a fully optimized human being, right? When I was a young composer, I always wanted people to tell me what they thought about my music. Do you like it, dude? What can I change? How can I make it better? And that's cool. That's what you need when you're young. You're growing. You're developing your taste. You're developing your sense of craft. You're developing your confidence. But at this point, I've been writing music a long time. If I don't think it's good, it's not good. But if I think it's good, it's good. And I don't need anybody else to tell me that, right? It's the level of evolution, right? I'm holding myself as a composer accountable to my own aesthetic principles and values as it relates to the cultivation and creation of musical soundscapes, right? That's how we need to live as spirits on this planet in physical form, right? You do this work, then you elevate yourself from part of the crowd to an individual who understands their place in the crowd, right? That's a different thing. Yeah.
From inside, not outside.
As above, so below, as within, so without. From the inside out, not the outside in, right? So this takes time, right? That example of composition, I started writing music when I was 6, I think. I was actually 3 or 4 when I wrote my first song. Nobody likes me. I was in trouble, but I didn't really know that I was writing music. I was just expressing myself. By the time I was 13, 14, I was writing songs for other people to play. But now I'm writing music for orchestras. That's time. 30 years, 40 years, right? So it takes time, and it can be difficult and frustrating, and it's why I use words like ritual and discipline, right? We need to remember that ritual is a series of actions performed on purpose, right? They're performed in a prescribed order, and the order, that word, equates to the purpose and discipline, and is both the training and development of habits through consistency and the creation of a new way of being and knowing. Ritual and discipline, right? Those are things. Sun Ra used to say precision and discipline, right? He wanted his musicians to execute with a level of precision because they are using discipline to execute the musical ideas, right? Very difficult music ideas require precision. You get to that precision through discipline, right? So the values of ritual and discipline allow us to create these new habits of being, habits of mind that allow us to change ourselves from the inside out and create transformed individuals, which then can exact or manifest transformation in the external, in the physical world, right? So new ways of being and knowing. We begin to know when we pass through the first 2 layers of understanding and mastery to come into relationship with our most inner self and engage the innerverse. I like that word, where we find our ancestors. We find that we now have access to what's called the Akashic record, or our genetic memory, and the rest of humanity, all of us, and the entirety of the universe. This is why it can drive some people insane, right? There are some people who are born with natural connections to these spiritual places, these dimensions, these, extra physical ways of being and knowing, right? And if we don't develop the level of discipline around how we engage these spaces, once they become open to us and we have access, it can be overwhelming. That's the other scary part. That's what I mean about power. Power is not only your ability to exert dominance over something else, right? It's not even about dominance generally in this context. It's about access to everything that we are And because of that access, you now have the ability to manifest something new and different. That's real power. Right? It's not dominance. Dominance is in my sense, in my view, a Eurocentric word that pits people and things against each other. This is not about competition in any kind of way. Yes, we are at war for the soul of humanity, but I am not at war with you. I'm not at war with human beings. I'm at war with constructs. Some people's Bibles say principalities, right? It's these constructs that are created because folks have not fully realized their humanity. So they're creating at a very base level, right? We can shift that as we connect to our deeper selves in each other. With discipline and mastery, we can access that power, those other realms, those other ways of knowing and being in a way that allows us to leverage what that gives us for change, as opposed to be overtaken and driven insane, right? Just this process alone, just this first ritual of connecting even, creates change and lays the foundation for external transformation as a reflection of the internal transformation. But the second ritual, the ritual of preparation, represents a series of actions, another series of actions that help us develop the tools and wherewithal to bring about the external manifestation of the internal transformation, right? Just because you change and transform yourself does not mean you have everything you need to change and transform things externally. You can definitely manifest, but it takes more than just that to change things, because you have to also understand systems and the way things work now so you can create a better tomorrow. So we'll talk about that after I play. All right. So, building community within and without. Why would I say building community within and without? Because when you get in touch with yourself and in touch with your ancestors and in touch with all that we are as human beings, much more than just this physical shell, right? You begin to find community within yourself, right? There's a cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender, and he was the amalgam of all his past lives, and he had uh, the ability to access wisdom from his past lives. And there's a scene toward the end of the whole series where he was able to call forth his past lives and ask them questions, right? That's community within. We have that same ability with our ancestors, right? Even those who are not blood related, we can call on any of our ancestors. Garvey, whose son passed away within the last week, so ashe to Marcus Garvey Jr. We can call on King. We can call on Chisholm. We can call on Tubman. We can call on Ida B. Wells. We can call on any of our ancestors, Nzinga, any of them, right? Tutankhamun, Imhotep, anybody from history. We can call on them because they are all part of who we are in our genetic memory. So that's community within, right? What we have to know and learn is how to engage that community. We also have to learn how to engage community in the physical plane as well, right? So the set of actions that define the first ritual work from the inside out and follows the ancient Kemetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. The same is true of the second ritual, the ritual of preparation. The path of becoming shouldn't be seen as something to be done for the sake of being done. We're not trying to be powerful for the sake of power, right? That's what got us here in the first place. That's what Europe did, right? We become so we can engage in the work of transformation, transforming ourselves from caterpillars to butterflies, as we've said, and transforming the world around us to ensure our children and their children's children's children are better because we were here, right? That's the goal. It's legacy, right? It's legacy. So we begin this process by preparing our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, and by expanding our focus beyond ourselves and entering into profound relationship with community, right? Often, this will and must happen simultaneously, right? With the first ritual. So you're doing these things. It's not like you do the first ritual, you complete that, and then you start on the second. No, this stuff is happening at the same time, right? I'm just trying to kind of carve out an understanding of what each step of the process is, so when it's happening, we understand where we are, and it gives us some agency of how to engage this process. So we must recognize that we are at war for the soul of humanity, which I've said. And we unfortunately can't we can't afford the opportunity or the luxury of just kind of a linear growth and process, right? One step A, step B, step C. Nah, it's like step A, Z, then you're moving backwards to the middle sometimes. So building a better world, we must understand that we have to do all of these things simultaneously. It's like black academics, black people with doctorate degrees and all that kind of stuff working in the academy. I don't think we can afford to just be academics. I don't think that black artists can afford to just be artists. I don't think that we have that luxury given our station in this culture of America and our station as a diaspora in the world, right? We have to do everything. We have to be the academic, we have to be the activist, we have to be the politician, we have to be all of these things in order for our people to get where they need to be. What are we preparing for, and how do we come into contact with people we can trust as comrades on the path to personal, collective, and societal transformation is really the question, right? How do we engage community? Who is our community, right? This all depends on the issues that resonate most with us, right? True transformation requires all perspectives and skill sets and of each component of how the society needs to transform to be at the table represented, right? What are you passionate about? Is it education? Is it health and wellness? Is it the law or arts or theology or building things or creating innovative processes and logistics? Or is it technology? What is it, right? within each of those kind of buckets that I just mentioned, there are sub buckets, right? Technology, there's computer science, there's hardware, there's software, there's all kind of stuff. Even within tech, even within education, there's higher ed, K-12, there's all kind of stuff. Health, there's mental health, there's internists, there are people who just deal with your eyes. There's all kind of stuff, right? So once you understand kind of the ritual of connection, and you're on that path, and you're now starting, because you're getting in touch with yourself, you know what resonates with yourself, with your interests, you understand what your purpose is, right? The universe starts bending and putting people and things like books or events and opportunities in your path that helps you build community, right? It responds to your subconscious desires and attracts those things, people, and events, opportunities that we need to continue our path, right? The help that the universe brings might not be always the help you think you want, but it's absolutely the help you need. There's an example. I went to college, and I didn't like college, so I left college. I went back to college. I didn't like it. I left again, and then my priorities changed, and I went to college, and I'm like, why am I here? This place does not get me what I want. I'm not learning anything. These people don't like me. In retrospect, I realized that what I was learning had nothing to do with my discipline, but had everything to do with how I engaged people who didn't look like me. I learned how to talk to white people at college. I learned how they think in college. I learned a lot of the why of who they are and how they exist in the world in college. Right? Music was my entree into that understanding. And I didn't know it, so I fought against it. But the universe was like, yo, you're here for a reason. You need to have this experience because there's work for you to do. And once I understood that, it didn't get easier or better, but my perception changed, and that's how I was able to finish, right? Our job is to recognize when these opportunities happen and take advantage of them, right? Being connected in the way that we've discussed in the first ritual conversation helps us recognize when something is helping and it's important, right? Educating ourselves individually and in community helps us understand the what, why, and how of a thing so we can plan and implement new systems, policies, actions, and approaches that manifest the changes that bring about transformation, right? This is process work. This is process work. It's not overnight. Everything has a process to it, right? Here's an example. Racism. Normally, right, humans existed before racism in ways that, yes, had differentiation, but not just because you looked one way or another based on your skin color, right? There was no black and white before the latter part of the 15th century, right? So I had to understand, I have to continue to grow my understanding of what the world was before racism, right? Then I have to understand the what, why, and how of the development of race as a construct, right? That then led to racism as a power dynamic, right? And what I've learned in my studies, as I've studied race and racism in order to help combat and help us overcome these issues, right, is that racism is something that I've come to understand as, a construct that functions to maintain class and power differentials between human beings with superficial phenotypical differences, right? That's an academic way of saying that racism is a system of social order that race is a system of social order, and racism is the control mechanism, right? It makes sure that, in our case, people of European descent always have an advantage over everyone else who does not physically appear to be a physical relation to Europe or a physical descendant of Europe, right? It is all about how you look like. We could shift it from skin color to whether or not you wear glasses or, as Jane Elliott's experiment, your eye color, right? It's really random, but it is a way to differentiate, create difference in order to create a different level and layer of how society is ordered, right? So I can prove the existence of racism in all avenues of human activity, even in the absence of white folk, right? So I've done that work. I can show you, I've been in rooms where there are only people of color and even rooms where there are only black people, and the way they thought represented whiteness, right? Even though white people weren't in the room, they say white. I'm like, ain't no white people here. Why are you whispering? Right? It's because this system of race and the mechanism of racism has so colonized the minds of non-white people that even when white folk aren't in the room, it's working in their behalf, right? So as I learned more, I began being more comfortable speaking about and from my growing body of knowledge. People would agree or disagree when I would speak publicly, or they would be intrigued and they would ask how or why and where I got the information from which I drew my conclusions, right? And as some of these conversations developed, these people, some of them, became part of a community of people I work with to bring about change and hopefully substantive transformation, right? That is how that community was built, right? So it started with my personal study and growth in a body of knowledge, right? Because I realized that this was a place where obviously my voice was needed. So I started to read and I started to listen and I started to learn. And then when I started to speak out and engage in conversation, what I said either resonated with folks or it didn't. And that's how I started to build community. I didn't build it, but I'm just saying that's how I started to come into contact with people who, thought similarly, right? So here's the thing, takeaways from that process. We've had more failures than successes, right? But we've learned more from our failures than we have our successes too. We don't always agree on the how, but we stay focused on the what and we stay focused on the what and we shape and reshape our how based on our learnings from our failures mostly. And the why is always constant. It's our North Star. The why is because people should be treated as humans and not as things based on how they present or how they look, right? So we're not even all in the same place with respect to our personal development, right? So these are not deal breakers. You don't have to believe the way I believe to work with me in this space, right? Particularly as it relates to spiritual and developing consciousness. You know, most people don't even know or think that change and transformation happens from the inside out, right? Because we've been socializing from a Eurocentric framework that privileges intellect and objectivity, right? Whatever that means, over spiritual concepts and constructs that then, bring about a holistic change and transformation, right? It took me years to understand this, more years to reconcile, and even more years to develop the patience to work with people that don't have or even aspire to higher levels of consciousness. That was part of my personal development. This is an example of how you're doing those first two rituals simultaneously, right? I am constantly becoming, and I am also constantly engaged in community. And as I grow, my engagement with community changes, it shifts. So when I was 20, I was like, you know what, y'all can kiss me in the pink. If you don't agree with me, if you don't believe what I'm saying, then I can't work with you. Now I'm like, okay, you're here at least, so your being here is important. I value your presence. How can we now have conversation to get us moving in a direction that helps everyone? It's a totally different perspective, right? Because of personal growth and how that personal growth shapes my engagement in community, right? The point here is that these rituals equate to a series of decisions and actions that lead to the requisite changes, however minute, that then bring about transformation, right? They aren't mutually exclusive, like I said. I'm still becoming, and I'm still working in community, right? So I've come to a conclusion that might change as I grow, but for right now, I think that we can expedite this process of transformation by taking a few steps back, right? Move a few steps back to move forward. And so my work now is to encourage others to embrace the process of multidimensional evolution, mind, body, and spirit, and live that evolution publicly as a practice of a politics of humanity, right? This is the ritual of action. This is the doing, the living, and the being on purpose, right? So we have to remember a couple things. Power begins at the point of conception. As soon as we make the choice to become, we are. The rituals and discipline we've discussed in this conversation of a politics of humanity are purposed to keep us on the path in the context of a society that is wholly hell-bent on our individual and collective destruction, right? So much energy in society is like what we see in the Matrix, where Machine City has those pods that people are in, and the whole city extracts resources while the people are just sitting there or laying there dreaming in these pods. They have no clue. They're dreaming in their minds, in their dreams. They're in La La Land, literally. They're plugged into the Matrix, and in the real world, the reality, everything is being extracted from them, right? Their bones, their muscles, everything is atrophied. It's a mess. They're plugged in literally, right? My question is, how do you wake up? Will you wake up? Will you get up? And will you get to work, right? I'm here. We're providing resources through the music, the curricula, everything that we've done through Drumversations thus far to help you, help others, help yourself, help me, so we can work in community, right? Have you started your journey? Where are you on your path? How can we work and grow together to bring about the changes and transformation we seek? Those are the questions that I have for you to reflect on, that I'll be also reflecting on as we move into 2021. How can we leverage these conversations and these learnings to do something significant, to create change that then brings about the transformation we seek, right? So, please continue the conversation with us on social media with the hashtag Politics of Humanity and the hashtag Drumversations. Check out our podcast, Drumversations. We got a new one up this week. I think it's really good. You can also check us out online at www.marklomaxii.com. And please, please take your place in the work to build a better community in America, a better country, and a better global society that's in balance with humanity, the planet, and the cosmos, right? Ashe and amen. I will see you all next year. Peace.